You don't know me, but I think I'm your mother.
The last time my mother tucked me to bed was when I was 7. How am I to believe you?
He was 7 years old the last time his mother tucked him into bed. He didn't know it would be the last time for 30 years. No goodbye, no explanation, just an empty house the next morning and a silence that followed him into adulthood. Then one Tuesday night, decades later, his phone rang, and a voice he hadn't heard since childhood said 4 words that changed everything. "It's your mother, Michael. This is a true story. Names have been changed to protect the people involved. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why she disappeared and why the reason might be harder to accept than the silence itself." Michael Bennett grew up believing one simple story. His mother left, and she never looked back. That was the version his father told him. That was the version his grandmother repeated every time he asked. For 30 years, Michael built an entire understanding of himself around that one sentence. But somewhere in rural Ohio, a woman named Diane Whitfield was living a completely different version of that same story, one where she never stopped looking, and every door she tried simply closed in her face before she could reach him. In 1996, Diane was 26, raising Michael largely on her own while her husband worked long stretches away from home. She had no family nearby, no car, and no one checking in on her. Neighbors remember a young mother who was exhausted in ways that went unnoticed, not a woman anyone suspected of planning to vanish. What looked, from the outside, like abandonment, was in truth the ending of a slow collapse that had been building quietly for years, one that almost nobody around her recognized until it was already over. The week Michael turned 7, his father came home early from a route and found the boy alone in the house. Diane was gone. There was a note on the kitchen table that Michael has no memory of, and within 2 years, his father had remarried and closed the subject of his mother for good. Michael learned quickly not to ask questions nobody wanted to answer. Before we go any further, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. What Michael didn't know was that his mother never stopped fighting to get back to him. 3 months after that night, Diane filed for partial custody. The paperwork sat untouched in a county filing cabinet for over a year. By the time anyone reviewed it, Michael's father had already moved twice, and the address on record no longer existed. Diane wrote letters to her son, to his school, to his father's parents, for years. Every single one came back marked return to sender. At the time, she believed it was simply misfortune. It would take her 3 decades to learn that it wasn't misfortune at all. The call came on a Tuesday evening in March. Diane had spent 2 years combing through public records, old yearbooks, and a single Facebook group for people from their old county, before a woman from her former church confirmed Michael's new last name and the city he now called home. When Michael answered that night, he assumed it was a scam call. Instead, he heard a voice he hadn't heard in 30 years, asking, carefully, if she had the right number. What she told him next undid everything he'd believed for most of his life. She hadn't left him. She had been pushed out, deliberately, by a father who wanted a clean start and a mother-in-law who agreed to help make that happen, by quietly intercepting every letter Diane ever sent. And she wasn't calling only to explain herself. She had recently been given a diagnosis that made time feel suddenly very limited, and she couldn't let it run out without her son knowing the truth. Michael didn't answer that first night. He sat holding the phone for nearly an hour after the call ended. 3 weeks later, he drove 4 hours to meet his mother face-to-face for the first time since he was 7 years old. He has said that walking into that room felt less like meeting a stranger and more like finally finishing a sentence that had been left hanging his entire life. Most of us are carrying someone we've never fully forgiven. This story isn't really asking whether Diane deserved a second chance. It's asking something harder. What would you do with 30 years of silence if the truth finally showed up at your door? If this story reached you, tell us in the comments what you would have done in Michael's place. And if this one hit hard, wait until you hear what we're covering next. A father who made the opposite choice, and what it cost his daughter to learn the truth 20 years later. Subscribe now so you don't miss it.